All right, Nicole, or well, I guess it's Karen. Who's host?
They both have it.
Vice Chair, somebody, we're ready to go.
That's Karen. We're live.
Good. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Tuesday, January the 5th agenda session. I now call this meeting to order. Could I have a motion on the minutes,
Move
please?
to approve the minutes. Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes with a proper second with no objection from the council. The minutes will stand as recorded. Ordinances on first reading this week, we have under Economic and Community Development 6A. Madam Clerk, would you read that, please?
An ordinance amending Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 21, Division 4, Sections 21-136 and 21-137, related to overgrowth and abatement.
We did have this in committee at our last meeting. Is there any questions or comments concerning this item? All right, Councilman Ledford, good?
I'm very good, Chairman.
All right, very well. We'll move now to resolutions 7A.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a lease agreement with Diagnostic Radiology Consultants, PA, in substantially the form attached to lease 173 square feet for an X-ray examination area at the City of Chattanooga Well Advantage Center, with rent in the amount of $250 per month for a term of 3 years, with the option to renew for one additional term of 2 years.
Okay, I think Councilman Oglesby, we covered this as well, didn't we, in our last ECD meeting?
Yes, we did, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments on this item before we turn it over for a vote? Okay. 7C, please, ma'am.
A resolution authorizing the Chief Human Resource Officer to enter into a professional services agreement with Diagnostic Radiology Consultants, PA, to provide diagnostic imaging services for city employees, retirees, and their dependents, Chattanooga Well Advantage Center, for a 3-year term beginning January 1, 2020, with an option to renew for a 2-year term.
Questions or comments? All right. Councilman Mitchell, under Public Works and Transportation, I believe we covered those items at our last and had those read into the minutes at our last Public Works and Transportation Committee meeting.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
We'll not read those into the minutes. If you have any questions or comments on those, go ahead and voice those now. If not, we will move down to purchasing questions. If you would, council, pull up your purchase items for this afternoon and let me know if you have any questions concerning any of these items. Okay, I'm seeing no hands. If you need to go back, we can. If you would look at your January 12 agenda, that's next week's agenda. Is there any questions or comments that you have concerning this agenda? Very well. Okay, if you would now pull up your future considerations. It is my understanding that the items listed on this agenda will be on your next week's 2-week agenda. So if you have any concerns about any of these items before they hit the 2-week agenda, let us know now. Let's see, we do have Miss Sullivan. Ms. Campbell, would you bring in Miss Sullivan, please? I'm assuming she has some additional information for our 3-week look ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There is one additional item that doesn't look like made it to the 3-week listing, the items for future consideration listing at press time, so to speak. So I apologize for that. We did talk about it earlier this morning, but it is an item, a contract amendment for the Moccasin Bend Golf Course. And this is a city-county contract, and y'all have already approved it. But since approval, the vendor has asked for some changes that are being negotiated between city and county now, and we anticipate that being done by the 19th and would like to have it on our items for future consideration and have it added to the agenda for the 19th coming up.
Okay, Mr. Attorney, did you send that request out to the entire council, or did that just go to me?
I think that just went to you this morning here. I'll be glad to send it to the entire council, and we are at least attempting to negotiate that one term that's an issue, and we'll be talking with the attorney on the other side tomorrow about that.
If you would, sir, go ahead and send that out to the entire council so that everyone will have it.
I will.
Okay, and so Ms. Sullivan, it's my understanding then that this will be on next week's 2-week agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is our plan. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Let's flip back over. Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morrow, do you think it will be ready to discuss in Public Works and Transportation Committee next week?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll handle it then. All right, Ms. Sullivan, anything else?
That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Karen, you can excuse our guest. Okay, we have no departmental reports this afternoon, and we have at our 2 o'clock strategic planning discussed our council meeting start time, and I think it's been suggested that we leave it the same. However, there was some discussion about election day council agenda. Let me move ahead to that. And if anybody has any suggestions about meeting on that day, I'll be glad to talk about it at this time on council meeting day, election day. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to suggest that we cancel the meeting for March the 2nd.
Second.
I
Okay,
would agree with that. And I believe we have done that in the past, Mr. Chair.
I believe you're correct. So March the 2nd, Mr. Attorney, I'm hearing a consensus of the council. Do we still need to take a vote?
It probably would not at least hurt to have it on the open record this evening so that people that might want to attend that meeting on March the 2nd would know that it's not going to be there. And I guess the other question is, are you going to have all of your meetings canceled that day or just the 6 o'clock meeting? And you need to have that on the record.
All of it.
All meetings.
Yes.
Okay, let me clarify what you're asking. I'm asking, can we vote on it right now during this meeting? And
You can vote on it right now. It just needs to be publicized so that people will know not to come.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the floor with a proper second to cancel all meetings on March the 2nd. Questions or comments before we vote? Councilwoman, is that an old hand that you have?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilwoman Burrs,
Yes.
Councilman Byrd,
Yes.
Councilwoman Coonrod,
Yes.
Councilman Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilman Ludford,
Yes.
Councilman Mitchell,
I could be mean right now, but I'm not gonna be. Yes.
Councilman Oglesby,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Smith,
Yes.
Chairman,
Yes.
unanimous.
Motion carries to cancel our March 2nd meetings. Madam Clerk, if you would make a note of that so we can also have that published. And then I guess maybe during committee reports, we'll mention that. Vice Chair Smith, why don't you handle that under legislative committee reports
Okay.
this
I will
afternoon?
take it.
Thank you. Okay, that wraps up this portion of our agenda. We have two committee meetings this afternoon, our Budget and Finance Committee and Planning and Zoning. At this time, I will turn the chair over to Councilwoman Burrs for our Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Councilwoman Burrs.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. You all got my memo about the 3 issues.
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Gosh, is there a second for that?
Yeah, we second.
Okay. Anybody opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you. I keep forgetting that. So we have 3 things. One is the plan of work, and you all got Councilman Gilbert's additions to the plan of work. Is there any reason we need to discuss it any further, or can we go ahead and make that our final and send it to administration as part of our input into the budget planning and design?
I'm good with it, Councilwoman.
Is everybody good with it? You've been over it. There were just the additions of Councilman Gilbert's, the very late additions. You know, I got to give you a rough time. Anyway, okay, if everybody's okay with that, then Nicole, if you would, Nicole's not there. Karen, would you see that administration gets that as our official input relative to our goals and objectives? And then you all will know exactly what administration is looking at as well. The second had to do with the outside accounting firm, and that's on the agenda. We discussed it. There was no further discussion the other day. Is there anyone that's not good with that? It comes up tonight. Okay, then we're good to go. The third has to do with the amendment B on the agenda. And as I said in the memo, you asked a lot of great questions. I believe they got answered. And I think you can read the rest of it for yourself. There doesn't seem to be a disagreement from any of you on anything but that one remaining 160. And now it's time to cut to the chase for what we're going to do with all of that. And Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope that I can offer a solution this afternoon that we can take some action on to get this money out to the agencies, to get it into the communities where it's needed. I did submit questions a couple of weeks ago concerning these items, and after some careful consideration and some conversation with administration, I would actually like to offer, which I would need a second or a co-sponsor on, but I'd like to offer an alternate version to our version 2B. And let me explain what that alternate version would be. It basically would provide to increase the city's estimated revenue for $800,000, and that money would be divided in the following way. $100,000 would go to a contingency fund appropriation for COVID-19 relief. $75,000 would go to the Forgotten Child Fund. $225,000 would go to the Tivoli and Memorial Foundation. $40,000 would go to the Bessie Smith Cultural Center. $300,000 would go to the Southeast Tennessee Development District for small business help, and $60,000 would go to the Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga, only to be used for eviction protection program. The other thing that this alternate version would do, it would take effect immediately upon second reading as provided by law. And I would like to offer that as an alternate version. I would need a second.
I'll second that and sponsor it with you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. So I think, Madam Chair, with that second, that would be something that we could get on the agenda this afternoon, Mr. Attorney.
Yes, sir.
And if you could put this together in the form of an ordinance and email it to the entire council just as soon as you can put that together, sir.
Okay, sir. I will.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
will this be item 2C version, alternate version 2C?
2C.
Is that how that
2C?
would be listed, Mr.
Yes.
Attorney? 2C?
Yes, sir. 2C.
Okay.
And I have another question for you, Chairman.
Well, Councilwoman
Is
Burke.
that it? And Councilman Ledford, you second that?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay, and before you speak, I saw Councilwoman Coonrod.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What was the original amount for the Bessie?
That is everything else. I mean, everything stayed the same. The only thing that was different is we put $100,000 in a contingency fund for COVID relief, and then 60,000 for the eviction protection program. The Bessie stayed the same. Southeast Development stayed the same. Tivoli's the same. Forgotten Childhood's the same.
Okay.
All of those agencies remain the same.
Will stay the same. Okay,
Yeah.
so did we ever get the information about the funding that was left over? Because at one point we were saying we were having a hard time spending the money because people couldn't get documentations in, and ECD was having a program to help people stay in homes. We had YFD doing the exact same thing, and then we appropriated some additional funds. So, I mean, is it needed, or are we making it to where it's a need? It's my question. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I just want to make sure that we're getting the best use out of our money, and it's just not sitting somewhere when we can actually put it to use now.
Well, I think that's a really good question, and I got that from several council people, Councilwoman. So whoever is there from administration, if we could have the amount of money that's left over with YFD in the rent and utilities subsidy, and what was the other one, Councilwoman? ECD? Not
Yeah.
ECD. Okay. If someone could.
Madam Chair, could I ask that you bring in Ms. Donna Williams?
And
she was very helpful to me answering a lot of those questions because I had some of the same questions myself.
Okay. All right. So let's bring in Ms. Williams.
Unmute.
Hi, you there?
I think so. Hello.
Hi.
Happy New
So
Year.
the question was, and I believe Councilman Henderson, the money that you're talking about that would go to the community foundation was for legal fees, correct?
It would be for legal fees for those who were facing eviction.
So it's to be used for legal fees. So Councilwoman Coonrod followed up.
That answered my question.
Does that answer your question?
Say legal fees prior. Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, so you don't need to know the other amounts that are left.
No, because I thought we were saying it's gonna be money to help additionally pay rent and lights.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay. Sorry, Donna.
Well, can I add one thing, Madam
Sure.
Chair? I think it's important for the council to know that the program, the eviction prevention program, is spectacular, the work that Legal Aid and Emily O'Donnell and CNE have been doing with funding from the Community Foundation. That money, the money that is being used to provide legal representation for many folks who are in dire needs because they don't have legal representation. So that money is used to provide that legal representation. But when they are negotiating a deal to keep a tenant housed, many times, most of the time, they are using the city's money to negotiate. So for instance, if a tenant is behind 3 months and he or she has no way of making that payment, they are negotiating on their behalf and they're saying to us, can you get this person qualified? Because if this tenant is eligible for the city funding, we can use that to negotiate the ability for them to stay wherever they are currently renting. So it's a great partnership between a number of us, and this money that will be used to provide legal services is greatly needed.
Okay. Any further questions, anyone, about this? Thanks, Donna. You can
Thank you all.
excuse Ms. Williams.
Appreciate it.
So I think what you're saying, Councilman Henderson, is everything stays exactly the same. However, the 160,000 that was in question, that there seemed to be some discussion about, 100 of it goes back in the COVID contingency fund or whatever that is. So the only real change is that 60 goes to the Community Foundation for legal representation.
That's
Okay.
correct. That's correct.
Okay. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is to Phil Noblett. First of all, I want to express my gratitude in what we have accomplished through this alternate version 2C, but I also understand with my conversations with agencies and also the administration over the holidays, that time is of the essence. So what I'd like to ask the city attorney is, can we call for an emergency meeting tomorrow to vote on these funds to release them now instead of waiting another week? And if we are able to do that, Phil, before you answer, that is a motion.
That is provided for in your charter, that you can have an adjourned meeting in the same week. That has been done before by the council, and yes, you can do that.
I would
I'd like
think,
to second that.
enough said, let's move forward. Let's get this money out where it needs to be.
We need
Okay.
time, sir.
Thank you for that, Councilman Ledford, because there was some discussion, like I believe back December the 8th, which held this money from being dispersed through the Christmas holidays and until now. And I applaud you for bringing that recommendation, and I fully support it with my second.
Thank you, Councilman Oglesby.
Okay, so what we're talking about are the monetary changes that Councilman Henderson talked about, and then to go further, doing an extraordinary second meeting, which would be tomorrow, right, Phil?
Yes, ma'am. Whatever the council chooses, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and so all of that would be taken care of at the 6 o'clock meeting. Good work, guys. Councilman Oglesby, is that a new hand?
That was my second, and support to Councilman Ledford's recommendation for the emergency meeting.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I lower my hand.
Okay, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're here and we're talking about meeting tomorrow, and I'm fully in support of that, that was one of the reasons I put in this alternate version that it would become effective immediately on second reading. I guess we need to get some consensus about what would be the best time for the majority of the council to meet.
After 4 o'clock for me.
After 4? Okay.
I'm good. I'm good anytime, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you say after 4, are you talking about at 4 o'clock, or you want to call it 5? Would everybody be good with 5?
Yes.
5? Okay. All right. So, Mr. Attorney, during our meeting tonight at 6 o'clock, I'm assuming at some point we need to announce that we will be not adjourning, but recessing until 5 tomorrow?
Yes, you will adjourn until 5 o'clock tomorrow to conduct other business and do that at the conclusion of your meeting.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman, and thanks to all of you. It's time for us to move on, and I think you've done it in great fashion. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Meeting's adjourned.
Very well. We're ready now for planning and zoning. Councilman Ledford,
Yes, sir.
the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to planning and zoning. I would like to ask for approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
No objections. The meeting or the minutes will stand. Is Karen, can you bring in Mr. Bridger, please? And while we are bringing in Mr. Bridger, we are going to be discussing our vegetation steep slopes results that we received back from the consultant at the end of the meeting, and some direction that I would like to give to staff and to Mr. Bridger to assign, answer the questions, but we'll cover that at the end of the meeting. Good afternoon, Mr. Bridger.
Afternoon.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine.
Very good. You got anything before we jump right in?
No, I haven't got plenty to say grace over for the moment.
Okay, let's be efficient but thorough, and let's start off with ordinances on first reading. Item C, case 0127.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to just pull up the order. This is where we had some changes. And I've just shown the language here, and I know I've talked with Councilman Henderson about this. This is just that item that had been deferred from last month. We've already briefed council on it, and I think there is some tweaking in the ordinance condition language. And so this has been introduced as an alternative version. It relates to, again, that it's a rezoning on, let me get the address, I'm sorry, on Bush Street for residential development. There've been several community meetings, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilman Henderson, this is kind of the language we're looking at this point.
That's correct, sir.
So I didn't want to go too much into it since we had a full presentation last month on it.
We did, yes.
Yeah. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, please.
Thank you. John, one thing that's a little bit confusing, at least on the on our agenda, we've got a planning version 2, and then we have an alternate version 2.
You read my mind, sir.
I think it's alternate version is what you're dealing with. I'm going to defer to Phil on that, but I'm assuming that's kind of, this is what I pulled up. This is the link from that agenda file.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. From alternate version 2.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
It says alternate version here, added with permission of Chairman Henderson. That should be where it is.
Okay. Very well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. That was on my mind too. I saw that. So very good. Very good. Thank you for the work on that. Let's move ahead.
And let me make this comment, if you would, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Since I will be, and I think at this point, I don't know that there would be a need to turn over the chair. I am good with alternate version 2. Hill City Neighborhood voted on this last night as an association and unanimously approved it. So I'm good to go with it.
Very good. Thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. John, let's move on to item 6A, case 0169.
All right, let me share my screen.
This is a lift conditions.
That is correct. At the top of my screen. I'm going to view present, I guess. I see slideshow beginning. Can y'all see my screen?
We see it, John.
Okay. So again, this is a request to lift conditions. This is the North Chattanooga Community Hill City community, just north of Gill Street intersection. They're wanting to lift the condition requiring rear vehicular access. It's for a proposed single-family dwelling. You can see the site here, located in Hill City, just a couple blocks off of North Market Street, north of Bell Avenue. The zoning in the area is a mix of single-family residential, RTZ, and R3. This particular site is zoned RTZ. Here are the current conditions that are on that entire RTZ zone. You see the condition with rear vehicular access. single-family detached dwellings only, and no more than 3 residential lots. This would only lift that first condition. So you can see the adjacent land uses, single-family detached and multifamily across the street. The Hillside City North Shore Plan recommends urban single-family for this location, which includes small lot single-family residential as small as 5,000 square feet. I think that the reason that for the request is I guess the concept that was originally proposed fell through, and so now they're trying to develop this one portion of the site. There was no opposition at PC. Both staff and Planning Commission recommend approving that request to lift that condition.
Very good. Chairman, you want to comment?
I do have a question. John, when was that rezoned and that condition placed on this property?
Okay, let me go back to history. 2018, about 2 years ago. I remember this case.
I'm trying to remember, and I'm trying to remember why we rear loaded this as a condition.
I think the idea was to make sure to have a bunch of curb cuts going along or parking, backing out onto the street.
Okay.
I can send you that case file before next week if you like.
Okay. All right, please.
You good, Chairman?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Very good. I'm seeing no other questions. In order to speed along our meeting this afternoon, if you would just go ahead and shout out to me as I'm trying to navigate the participants window. Just go ahead and voice out, and I'll call on you. John, let's move on to case B0172.
Yes. This is a request to rezone a tract of properties in the Hickson community off of Hickson Pike from R1 to C2, basically for additional space for parking of vehicles. You can see the site here is located just across the street from the intersection of Boy Scout Road. Currently zoned R1, but you can see there's already a mix of C2 and R2 zones in this location. That also is reflected in the land use. There's vacant land to the rear, but you do have commercial across the street. You have a church across the street and residential, but a mix again of commercial and residential and institutional uses. The Hickson North River Plan recommends medium business mix for this location. That includes commercial uses, such as what's being requested. So staff in reviewing this consider that the request was consistent with the adopted area plan and adjacent uses. And so we did make a note because there is a part of the property that has like a steep drop to the Hickson Pike, and we just made a note that consideration should be given to sharing access with the adjacent property just to minimize any disturbance of that hillside. So it's more of a note as an FYI as this property moves forward through the permitting process. But other than that note, we recommended to approve. There was no opposition at Planning Commission, and Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve this rezoning request.
Very good. Thank you, John. Vice Chairman, comments?
I'm good, sir. I have received no opposition to this. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. All right, John, we're doing well so far. Item C,
Sure.
case 0027.
This is one that's been deferred from a prior, back in the fall of last year. I've got the actual zoning map up if you would like, Councilman, for me to bring up. I can do that real quick. Give me a second.
Yeah, while you're doing that, John, can I just go ahead and tell you,
Yep.
I will be seeking another pretty long deferral on this case. We have not really reached any thresholds of agreement with the community surrounding. We are waiting to still hear back from TDEC on some questions regarding some water issues. And also there is another wrench in the works. If you want to talk a little bit about where we're at with the Area 11 plan.
Sure.
This is really a instrumental piece of the Area 11 plan, and I do not want to make a bad decision in conflict with what the Area 11 plan will result. I have spoken to the applicant, and they are in absolutely zero hurry on this. So I think we need to let some things play out. So I will be asking for another longer deferral on that. But John, you want to talk about the Area 11?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, for that, we'll be kicking off the community process sometime in February. We're working on now, as you know, because of COVID, we're having to do things a little different in terms of community engagement. And so we're going to basically be using our web portal to help engage the community on this first phase, which is really just understanding some of the current I call issues and opportunities in this area based on current trends. And so there'll be some basic factual information provided, and then, invite the community to give us some of their feedback on what they see as some of the priority issues. So it's very that's the first part of this process. And as you know, it'll develop as we move along.
You're seeing on screen, council, you'll see a proposed C2. The entire proposal is actually RTZ. Is that correct, John?
I think the applicant had requested C2 in the front, but I think I think Planning Commission at the time recommended just RTZ as well as staff.
Right. Yeah. So this one's a bit complicated, and
right.
Honestly, I'd really rather not travel into the mud on this until we're ready. We have a lot of work to do on this, as we did the previous Shallowford project up the road, which came out and yielded a good result. So if there's no objection by council, I'd like to move on to the next case that we can discuss.
All right, let me get back to share my screen. Let me get back to here. Give me a second here.
That's case D0180.
Okay, y'all, I'm making sure my thing is going. I'm getting a little.
I know I'm moving.
A minute. That's where it gets weird. Okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm sorry. I'll give me a minute.
You're okay.
I'm gonna go stop share for a second.
I'm pushing you a little bit to be efficient. It's all good.
Trying to get to where I can open this thing up. Okay, how do I stop screen share? All right. Where am I doing wrong here? Here we go.
Probably Vice Chairman Smith. He's messing with it.
Okay. Can y'all see the slides now? Can y'all see the slides now?
We can see the slides. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're on to this request, if I'm not mistaken, that we're on agenda item D. Is that correct?
That is correct. 0180.
Okay, so this is a request to rezone a tract of land from R1 and R2 residential zone to R3 residential zone for a townhouse development, proposing 21 units. This is located in the Highway 58 community, just southwest of Highway 153. If you know where the current Humane Society facility is, that's just to the south of here. And you can see South Access Road where this abuts. Again, we're proposing to rezone this tract of land to R3 to accommodate a townhouse development. You see the location here at the 4,000 block of Randolph Circle. Again, the zoning pattern in this area, you already have a mix of C2, R3, and R2 and M1 zones. So there's already a mix of variety of zones at this location. Give you some of the zoning history of this area. In 2018, we zoned that portion of Harrison Pike from R1 to R3. And you can see we also zoned a property from A1 and R1 to C2 with conditions. So there's been some rezoning already, upzoning in this area. If you look at the mix of land uses, you have office, commercial, church across the street, residential, and the Humane Society to the south. The Highway 58 Community Land Use Plan recommends basically a business park, kind of business and technology, which does not include residential, but it's a similar intensity, clearly as multifamily or higher density residential. So while it is not specifically mentioned as a use in the community plan, there's already R3 zoning in this area, and staff considered to be compatible with the adjacent land uses and development form in the area. So we recommend to approve. There was no opposition at Planning Commission, and Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve.
Very good. Councilman Gilbert, comments?
Yeah, I'm gonna get with Mr. Anderson this week, and I got a few questions for him, and we'll have them hopefully answered by next Tuesday.
Very good. We look forward to hammering that out.
All right.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Councilman.
All right. Now the next request, this is case 179, agenda item E. This is a request from R1 to C2 convenience commercial zone for a medical spa. This is on the Shallowford Road, 6,000 block of Shallowford Road. As you know, we had several cases in this area. If you look at the development pattern in this area, you got a mostly single family. You do have a couple institutional and a couple little spot areas where you have some commercial, but for the most part, it's residential. If you look at the zoning pattern, again, predominantly R1, you do have that one C2 node to the west, and you have a C2 node to the east. And again, it's showing the history of when those were rezoned, but nothing in the middle of this area has been rezoned to commercial. If you look again, the development pattern of this area is mostly single family with just a couple exceptions. We did a policy for this area after the Shalford Road community plan was adopted that kind of clarified the zoning policy after Shalford Road was widened. And that policy clarified that we could support some kind of transition to what I call office and limited multifamily along that corridor, kind of like an R4 or O1 type zone. So we did do some follow-up conversations with the land development office based on what was being proposed, and we determined that a medical spa would be allowed in an O1 zone as long as there's not any on-site retail sales. So you can do services, you just can't do any on-site retail sales. So staff recommended to deny the applicant's request and approve the O1 zone. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. They did, as I recall, I think talk to the applicant about the O1, and as I recall, that would be fine. There's a condition there that was recommended to be added to this request, and that is no drive-throughs permitted. So both staff and PC recommend approve. There's one additional condition that Planning Commission is recommending, that is that there be no drive-throughs.
Very good. Thank you, John. We did make that as a prerequisite to probably what was going to be an issue moving down the road. Hopefully we covered that in PC. Dr. Burrs, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. So I remember you telling me that you had suggested, I've not spoken to the people at all.
Okay.
So unless I speak with them, I'm probably going to either be asking to defer or deny, because I don't think they're clear on the fact that they can't sell product there.
Gotcha.
And I don't know of a medical spa that doesn't sell product.
Right.
And so I'm thinking there's some confusion there. So hopefully they will get in touch with me and we will be able to speak, because I don't want them misled. As far as the O1 office zone, we've had this discussion with the neighbors over and over and over again, and they're trusting that we're going to stick to O1. So the fact that they didn't show up to a 1 o'clock Zoom meeting they're working or doing whatever. I don't think it means that they want anything any different. So hopefully the ladies will be in touch. If not, we'll just have to take it from there.
Understood.
John, if you would, I did mention that to the applicants at PC and stress the importance of reaching out to Dr. Burns. I know this was their first time engaging in this process, so and then of course we had holidays, so would you please reach out to them and make sure that contact is made, because that's one of these planning and zoning goals that we stress is contact.
Got it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Burrs.
Thanks.
All right, item F 173.
Yeah, this is in the South Side community off of Old Rossville Boulevard. It's a request to rezone from UIN3, which is like an industrial form-based code zone, to UCX3. Just give you a little bit of distinction between the two. The UIN has some minimum setback requirements, is more geared towards traditional heavy industry, whereas UCX3 allows you to put your building closer to the street. It has a little bit more flexibility with your building heights. So they're wanting to rezone this to UCX3 to accommodate a structure they've already got on the site that they're trying to reoccupy to have multiple uses in. So they need that zone to accommodate that proposed use. Again, if you look at the current site, it's already currently zoned in the form-based code area. It's zoned UIN3, and they wanted to change it to my notes again. UCX3. Okay, so if you look at the surrounding development pattern of the area, you've got a mix, particularly on Rossville Avenue, what I call traditional shop front building types, where the buildings are on the street, 2 to 3 stories, some 1 stories, and you had that sort of industrial to the back, and you see where it's a single family residential, that's the Fort Negley neighborhood. So now, in terms of the plan recommendations, the downtown plan, while it doesn't propose a specific use for this site, it does encourage redevelopment and a mix of uses that kind of provides that walkable feel. The Staff, looking at the request, felt it was compatible with the land use plan and the overall development form along that street, so we recommended to approve. There was no opposition at Planning Commission. Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve that request.
Very good. Councilman Oglesby, comments?
No, other than the fact it's a good project, the fact it has no oppositions, and I'll be having some more conversations with them just in general about the future of that building. So I'm good. We can move on. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Appreciate your input. All right. Case G181.
Yes, this is a request to rezone from M1 manufacturing zone to C3. As you can see, this is kind of like the last remaining M1 zone pocket. This is in the Cameron Harbor area. The rest of this area has already been rezoned to C3. So this is kind of the last piece to kind of fall in place. It's located, again, 505 Riverfront Parkway, currently zoned M1, and they're wanting to rezone it for a mixed-use development, similar in character to what you already have around Cameron Harbor. You can see there's already been a pattern of history of zoning cases in this area of rezoning to C3 conditions in this immediate area. You see the mix of uses. You have a hotel, residential, and then more of an urban walkable pattern. And of course, you have the Blue Cross Blue Shield corporate office up on top of the hill there. While the downtown plan does not specify a specific land use, it does talk about the West Side District, and it's indicating that it'd be appropriate to have a mix of single unit residential and non-residential uses with urban narrow setbacks, which that C3 with conditions would accommodate. So staff recommend approval of the C3, and like we've done in the past for projects in this area, we have a whole list of conditions, and I won't go over all those. It's quite lengthy. You can kind of see it talks about the process for review, addresses setbacks, height requirements, access, and off-street parking. And again, the reason all these conditions are in here is C3 really doesn't have any standards whatsoever. And so what we've done in C3 cases is we have these conditions to address basic standards. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition. After hearing from the applicant and the staff, the applicant did have one request and change to one part of the condition as it relates to dumpster locations. And I'll just kind of highlight that for you right here. Basically, based on their building situation, they're going to need to put the mechanical equipment facing the right of way. They just need to screen it. And so they just basically asked to delete that section that says shall be placed to the rear of the property. So it still need to be screened, just not requiring it to be placed to the rear. So Planning Commission was fine with that and recommended that modification to the suggested conditions.
Thank you, John. Councilman Oglesby, comments, and on that last note, John, I think it was physically impossible.
That's right.
To put it in the rear of the property. So hence the.
Yeah. No, it's a great project, and it just shows the facts what you can work out when you got a lot of conditions that you have to work through. And I'm really excited for this project. And once again, I'll be meeting with them again this week just for general conversations on, appreciate the work they do and some other things that they can do in our city that can benefit all of us. So I'm real grateful and thankful and support this project.
Very good. Great work, Councilman Oglesby. I know you've been working diligently with all these cases down there, and I appreciate your being overviewing all of this. Great work.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
John,
Yes, sir.
170. Do you need a break? Am I pushing you too hard?
No, we're good. New year, off to the races.
We're hitting it, feet running, that's for sure.
That's right. This is a request in Riverside community to rezone a tract of land, basically one residential lot from M1 to O1, basically to remodel existing single-family dwelling for an office. Property is located at 3104 North Hickory Street. This is in the Riverside community. Again, the current zoning, you see, this is an example of how, back in the day when they first did zoning, they did a blanket M1 across a lot of neighborhoods. And so you can see like this whole block, which clearly has residential on it, was zoned to M1. So they're wanting to basically retain that existing house and use it for an office. You can see there's a mix of industrial, office, and residential on this block. The Historic River Ridge Plan recommends urban residential place type. So that can consist of a variety of configurations, including office as a secondary use. So based on that, that they're retaining the existing residential structure. We've basically, staff recommends approval as being consistent with the urban residential policy recommendation. At Planning Commission, there was no opposition, and Planning Commission concurred with staff's recommendation to approve.
Very good. Councilman Byrd, comments?
No comments, sir. Thank you, John.
All right. Very good. Thank you, John. We have one resolution
I
for
think
a
that's
special exceptions permit.
And that's for the liquor store. And
Yep.
Phil, he may jump in on that. As I understand, it's just a renewal. Is that correct, Phil?
Yes, sir. Just a renewal.
Okay, then we're good there. John, take a deep breath.
Okay.
There we go.
That's
Okay.
more.
John, we've received some feedback from Camrose staff on
Yep.
the vegetative steep slope component. And I think that we need to have council input on where we want to move with that. I'm a little, I won't lie, disheartened with the obstacles that seem to have been presented to us.
Sure.
But I want to make sure that we assign these questions and hurdles, and we assign a time frame for getting answers back. It looks like you've already started to read my mind. Good. Because I know this is new. I know that it's not something we have peer studies on, and I do appreciate the folks at Camrose working through it and kind of doing this on a side project. They did push it for us. Here we are, January beginning, and I'm ready to move with the obstacles that are in front of us.
Sure. Thank you. Well, like I said, just to give you a quick kind of overview, as you remember, we kind of going way back to we had the natural resources report back, I think it was early to midsummer. And we talked about a whole variety of options that looked at, again, those three phases: pre-construction, site design, on-site construction management, and remediation. I think after reviewing that report, council was looking at maybe doing something, well, I'll call that more that third post-construction remediation, as I understand per y'all's feedback. And this particular proposal kind of came out of that, the idea of how can we look at kind of a remediation strategy as part of addressing development on steep slopes. And so I think there's some language, Councilman, that you received from a landscape architect as an idea or concept that we wanted to have a look at. And so looking at that language, because our staff, we're not trained landscape architects, we recommended getting a consultant to look at this just to give us some feedback from that line of expertise. That consultant was Camiros. They have a landscape architect on staff. So they started looking at it this fall. And so that report that I sent you all, we sent you a report in December that looked at staff's feedback as well as the consultant report. And some initial feedback we had from some contractors when we were looking at kind of costing out compliance. They brought up some additional questions I thought would be good to kind of rise to your attention. So today I'm just kind of giving an overview of those main elements. So just as a reminder, because I know it's been a minute, but just to kind of remind the key elements of the proposal, it would apply to residentially zoned properties only. So it would be commercial or industrial. It only apply to portions of a site area that are cleared or graded with a slope of 35% or greater. The way that concept works is it sets a minimum area of disturbance. So first you got to disturb a certain amount of area to begin triggering the remediation process. Then once you get over that threshold, there's these coverage values that are established based on how much area you're disturbing. And that kind of sets your budget, so to speak, for how many credits you need in terms of replanting, revegetation. So that's kind of the main element. It also offers some credits as an idea, maybe an idea of credits for protecting existing trees on the site. So that's kind of the main elements. So the consultant, and looking at that, as you know, looked at it against also some peer cities. They did note that actually there was not any examples they could find of this. This is kind of fairly unique, but they did note that they thought that the concept was laudable. It just, I think the main thing is there's some aspects of the language that need to be worked out to make sure we understand how it's going to work out and the implications for a development review process. So I'm going to highlight some of those things. First, as you know, always that conversation, what is a steep slope? There are other parts of the city code that have different definitions. And so there's, we just want to be sure that we're not creating conflicts within the city code. There's a 33% threshold requirement for slope stabilization. The resource rain management guide refers to steep slopes as those greater than 15%. And the consultant noted that some of the other communities they looked at, typically the range where they start this is 15 to 25. So just know that there's some variation there. I think the other thing that the consultant noted in looking at the landscape material requirements, the minimum plant size is noted in the draft proposal was not the same as those that are in the landscape regs, even though it's referring to those. So we need to make sure there's alignment between what's in the landscape regs and what this proposal is recommending. In terms of the coherence of the proposed language itself, there's two different thresholds, and consultants were not sure kind of how we want to treat those. There's this mention of a 3,000 square foot threshold before you start to comply, but then as you get into these tables, you see there's like a 1,000 and a 2,000 and 2,500. We're thinking that the 3,000 is your first threshold, and then once you reach that, then you start looking at these other numbers, but we need to kind of work through what that means.
I believe that's accurate.
Then one of the things they noted in terms of it kind of divides the tables based on whether you're doing single family or what I call multifamily or townhomes, and noted that the actual thresholds are higher for multifamily compared to single family. And the wonder is there, maybe do we need to have them be the same or maybe a lower threshold for multifamily, since they tend to have a higher impact on slopes, because you tend to have more paving and that kind of thing associated with a multi-unit development. So that was some of the comments they noted in their feedback related to that. Turn to some gaps. Again, be careful about where we want the vegetation to be planted. It was not clear in the language how close those trees should be planted to where the area is being disturbed. And clearly you have to put it on the same property, but it wasn't clear how close in proximity those plantings need to be to the disturbed area. And they would recommend adding some language that would do that. And then I think another big change just to be mindful of is currently there is no stormwater review for individual single family developments. You basically, and I'm sure Dallas and Charlie will tell you, you basically you show your property lines and your setbacks from your property line. That's it for a single family dwelling. This would be a much different kind of process. It'd be much more deliberate. You'd have to do a site analysis, provide a calculation showing where your steep slopes are. You have to provide samples of your plantings and what you're proposing. So it's a lot more submittal requirements than what we've done in the past for a single family. And also, of course, because of those requirements, there'd be more intensive staff review, both in terms of permitting and on-site inspections.
So in essence, John, there would be some planning involved.
Yeah, that's true.
What a novel idea.
Development review, yeah, that's right. So, which happens. I mean, as you know, those folks do a great job, and have been really doing a great job in terms of trying to review development as it takes place. So just know in terms of we did talk with the land development team, and we talked about kind of again what they would mean for the enforcement and development review process. They're thinking you need at least 2 full-time staff to do this, because you're going to need somebody working the site plan review process and somebody doing field compliance. So that's at a minimum. You need to potentially look at 2 additional staff. And they concur with the consultants who are saying that in terms of development review process, this will be a big change from what we're typically doing for a single family. Then it just kind of highlights. Good. You pass back there.
Oh, I said, which is nothing.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. And then contractor comments. Again, we met with some contractors mainly just to kind of cost out. Because remember, one of the things we were looking at doing was trying to get an idea of what the cost of compliance would be. And actually, we didn't get to that. We got more to just them giving us feedback on the language about some questions they had. And so I'm just sharing these with you. Like the idea, if the slope had already been disturbed prior to them commencing the activity, would you still have to do remediation? And just kind of being clear, what does disturbing a steep slope mean? And then I think the other question was, if we're doing grading and clearing, typically that happens in the subdivision process. So does that mean you try to catch it at that point, or when they're putting a house on the site? Typically, as you know, when you're doing landscaping plantings, you typically want to do that after you've done your home construction, because as you know, you got a lot of heavy equipment. So there's some thought needs to be considered about when you'd want to stage that replanting to align with the typical land development process. And I would say usually that would happen after when you're doing your home construction, or post when you've already got your building in, because you got all your heavy equipment out of the way. So the other question, which I thought was interesting, what if you take a steep slope that was steep and you grade it so it's no longer steep, does that mean we still need to remediate? So, and also that one contractor had an idea. What about credits for remediating off-site slopes that have already been graded? So is there a way to get credits for, we've got some slopes in the city that have been already graded and cleared, and what if they offer it as a way of improving that situation to an off-site remediation? So that was just some of the feedback we got. So I'd leave it there. Like anything is, when you're doing an ordinance, it just takes some work to get all the details right. So I'll turn it over to you, Councilman, and the rest of the council if you have any questions or give us some direction about our next steps.
So I'm going to jump in and then I'm going to ask for questions. I go to that. You want to take your screen down so I can see
Yes, sir.
Participants easier. Thank you. So John, what I'm hoping to see next is actual assignments to the appropriate personnel to come up with answers on this. Some of this is in the city attorney's office, I can see. Some of this is going to go into LDO. Some of this is going to go into our landscaping folks. So what can we do, or we can work on this offline, but I want to assign these questions to the appropriate bodies with a time frame that we can get an answer back. Because I think that just because this is new doesn't mean we shouldn't be afraid of it. Maybe we start something for once, and everybody else will start to look at us as an example instead of us looking for everybody else for answers. So I'm willing to be bold. I'm willing to, and I know this council wants to see results based on community input and concern. And I think we've all seen the examples of why we need to do something, and there's nothing in place now. So is this is this going to solve every problem? No, it's not going to solve every problem. Is this a great start to build on? Absolutely. It's better than what we have now, which is absolutely nothing. So I see some hands raised, John, and I'm going to take them as I see them in order. I don't know if this is the correct order, but Councilman Gilbert, you go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. John, good presentation. Darren did a great job. Going back to what I asked in the past, it seems that we do have guidelines, some guidelines in place now, and this is going to be hopefully soon, where the developer, we got great developers and we got poor developers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no consequence behind the poor developers. In other words, they get a fine, but they never receive the fine. They might say it, but they don't ever pay out. There's no, where if you have a fine, then we're going to shut you down, not only on this site, but this other site until you pay this fine off. We need some teeth into whatever we do, so that they take us seriously when we go to them. And I think it's the biggest problem with Dallas and others, that they go to court, they give a fine, but they don't actually pay it. They don't pay no attention. Just keep doing business. We need to put something there where if you do this, this is going to happen. And I think some of the builders and developers like that, because it was mentioned in one of the meetings that we did have, that we got current rules, and this is a great rule too, but we don't have anything to enforce it where and make it work. So could we, I know you're dealing with this, can we look at also the part of making people obligated if they're not doing what they should do?
Right.
Then they need to correct it.
And I think LDO is doing some of that already, and maybe it's something that as y'all fought with maybe with Richard, Dallas, Charles, and Donna, to kind of give you an update on how they're, as I understand it, they're already doing some of that in terms of policing, construction site management. But again, I'm not on the in-ground details but at least from what I've heard, that's being done. So I mean, Councilman Lifford, I'll defer to you. I mean, if y'all want to have them come in at some point and kind of share how they're enforcing it currently.
So here's what I would say to that. I think this is appropriate. Is some of this is a three-pronged approach. We're not going to solve all this, I don't think, in planning and zoning committee. I think what I'm hearing from Councilman Gilbert, and I've heard across the board, is absolutely correct in working with LDO. So I think we may need to ask our distinguished chairman of ECD to work with LDO. And recently, it seems to be a philosophy that I'm gravitating towards, is that the change coming from within versus the change from coming from outside seems to happen a bit faster. What I mean by that, and some of you have heard me say that, is if we can work more internally through our departments and through our own experts who work for the city to implement change, then a lot of the work is vetted for us and a lot of the answers have already been answered. So Councilman Gilbert, you're exactly right. We need to make sure that the mechanisms that are in place, maybe they can be improved from within. Maybe they can have a stronger mandated presence. But I think we need to work at this from not just planning and zoning, but I think through ECD. So I would say, I know Councilman Oglesby has 60 days approximately left, but maybe we could stir the pot on that and get some conversation going, and at least dip our feet in and get going with some items actually coming from and recommendations from LDO.
I like that idea. It's a great idea. Because again, I think we are tying our employees' hands when they cannot do anything. It's just that they give a fine, but it's just doing business as usual.
Yeah.
But we get tools, I think that we can get a lot done more.
Oh, I think it's going to take all of us, and it's going to take probably every committee working together. But I think that we're a multi-pronged approach. We've called this phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. This is kind of the phase 3, I believe. Let's dive in. Let's come at this from an internal. Let's see what can be done from internally, and let's work on that. Councilman Oglesby, if you know, I'm going to throw you some work here, but I'd love to see what maybe we could get in line for discussion. Maybe get Dallas and Charlie to come talk to us and see, and maybe give us some information on what they think we can improve. If something that we need to do on our end, then I think this group will do it. So that's what I have to add in there. Chairman Henderson, I see your hand, sir. You're on mute.
Thank you. John, one thing, this is sort of post-construction.
That's correct.
And we need to make sure our post-construction and our pre-construction line up with each other. One of the comments from the builders that I immediately picked up on is, what if we remove a steep slope so that it's no longer 35%? Mm-hmm. Part of my concern with this whole ordinance is that we keep the character and look of Chattanooga. A portion of my district is called Hill City for a reason, because no developer went in and leveled it. It's not called Level City, it's called Hill City. So I think this needs to have a component, maybe pre-construction, that lines up with post-construction, so that we address the fact that we're not removing and taking out our hills and our slopes, so that we're just flat.
Good point. Very good point.
Yeah, and that was noted and again, the natural resources study. That was one idea which got a lot of attention. I'll leave it that, about limiting excessive grading of steep slopes. So that was in the natural resources report. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Very good. Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Councilman Henderson, for pointing that out. I saw quite a bit of humor in the, can I chop the hilltop off and not have to worry about anything else? But thanks for pointing that out. But this is a question I have, and maybe it goes to the attorney. We can all, as different committees, chip in and do this, and I think that's a great plan, Mr. Chairman. But where I see the potential for getting held up is in actually writing this ordinance. Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Noblet, and in my vision or view, this almost seems to require an attorney that not only has some experience in real estate, but in environmental concerns as it relates to land, right? As it relates to stormwater. And Mr. Attorney, I don't know how much experience your staff has, but if it's not enough, do we need to go out and find somebody and contract with them to help us write this?
be glad to do that. I guess the other side of that is the attorney doing a lot of work for developers that might want to do things in a different way. That's the only aspect. We'd have to search and make sure we had a group of people that we thought that you would be willing to trust in being able to do that.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a great answer. I'm not as concerned about someone who is now working for us trying to pull the wool over our eyes because they have experience with developers. That might actually be a plus, depending on who the attorney is. So I guess where I'm going for this, and let me just state right now, this whole, let's go find an easy piece of land to work on and make it better versus what we're going to do to this steep piece of land. I'm very reluctant to go down that road. Not only reluctant to go down that road, but also reluctant to give any form of trade-offs like that. And as it relates to subdivisions, some of you folks have a lot of subdivision space left. Where I see quite a bit of steep slope damage being done is not subdivisions. And that's in District 2. And we got a lot of hills over there too. And it's usually onesies, twosies, threesies. And so I would right now, just right off the bat, say this should not be just for subdivisions. This should be, you can make a piece of land look horrible building one house. And I'm talking about all the surrounding land and everything with it, just with one house. And so I'd like to just really push for the council to think of it in those terms also. And that's really just on an opening salvo, so to speak, all I have to say about this right now, but I'm excited to try to finally get something done. And just a little, he's actually, Councilman Oglesby actually has almost 90 days left. The election may be March 2nd, but nobody gets sworn in until April. So that'd be the only thing. And thank you for your time, Council and Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. John, you want to touch on the neighborhoods versus individual real quick?
Make sure I'm following you there.
Oh, this will address individual lots.
Yes, right. Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
But I think what Councilman Mitchell was speaking to, I think it was a question about, do you trigger compliance at the subdivision planning stage as
Right.
opposed to individual? And as constructed, at least the current proposal would apply to both.
Okay. Very good. Councilman Gilbert, is that an old hand, sir?
That's a new hand. I just
Go ahead.
want to follow back up with Councilman Overby. Can we not set it up and have Mr. Dallas and others come in to tell us their view of the situation when it comes to enforcement, and how can we help them do a better job?
Oh, absolutely. As you can see, this was my notes to address first thing in the morning. Great mind.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you, Councilman.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Councilman.
I think they would welcome an opportunity to talk about what they're doing with enforcement.
Yeah.
Great.
And I've actually had this conversation like over a year ago on how we could work this. So now it look like we are getting up ahead of steam to actually make it happen. So excellent.
Thank you. Dr. Burrs, I see your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. So thanks for all the hard work on this, both you and John. It's really good. When you brought this, did you pass this by, have you passed this by the home builders yet?
We did. Actually, I tell you what's interesting about this is, and it was very important, was to put our conservation groups that were very active. I won't name names of anybody right now, but it's interesting because we were actually to put them together. At one point in time, I remember pre-COVID, they were sitting on opposite sides of the room. And then we worked towards consensus, which is so important to get anything done. And next thing I know, they're going to lunch and they're sitting next to each other in our council chambers because they're having conversation and they're understanding. You know, is both sides completely happy? No, that's, you know, welcome to the world. But did they find consensus? Did they find common ground? Something to work from? Yeah, both groups actually came together and said, okay, this is a great first step. And it's interesting to see that happen. And I wish in this city and in this world, we'd have a whole hell of a lot more of that going on. There's a lot more we could get done.
Yeah, collaborative mediation works well.
Working together.
Let me ask you this. So have we pinpointed the areas that that still need work?
Well, I think the Camaros report needs those sections to specifically go. That's what I'm going to work with John next.
Okay.
It's a little difficult to do over the holiday, but I can right off the bat, I can see where Phil needs to dive in. I see where LDO needs to dive in, and we need to get some of these questions answered. But we need and that's what John and I are going to do next, assign these and then assign a date. One thing I've learned from some of my colleagues on this council is do not leave this open-ended. We need a date for response, and I'm hoping to actually have some answers in our February planning and zoning meeting, if I may be so bold.
And one more, if I may, Mr. Chair. So these questions that came up, they came up from the home builders?
The questions that you're seeing, I do not know where if you're talking about contractor questions specifically, I do not know where those questions came up from. I was not part of that. That was part of the Camaros report.
Yeah, we had a meeting, Councilwoman Burrs, we had a meeting with some contractors to break to the costing. Because one thing we were looking at was kind of, okay, what would it cost to, we tried like different sizes of sites, and which we actually never got to the costing part. I think there were some more questions about the language itself. And so I felt like, at least for y'all's benefit, to hear what we heard from them in terms of some questions about the language. But it was just strictly, that was from AGC folks, just to get, because they're typically the ones involved in doing the actual, construction element. So we try to get some, again, baseline cost estimates, but we didn't get to that. They just gave us some feedback on the language.
Well, I just think that when we had a meeting with everybody as a whole, when we could meet together, people from all various perspectives gave some great input. They weren't all agreeable,
sure,
but they gave great input. And I was just thinking, now that you've done all this great work, if it's possible to get those kinds of people back together again, I don't know that you need to go to the lawyers always. What you could do is get people to come up with what works for them. They seem pretty reasonable, people on all sides. So just tossing it out there. Great job. Thanks, Darren.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, I am seeing no other hands. John, do we have another topic we were going to cover off our agenda?
I think that's enough, yeah.
I think we've done a lot of work today on that, so I'm not going to wear everybody out before we come back at 6. Does anybody on council have any further comments or questions or words of wisdom? All right. Well, Mr. Chairman,
I couldn't get my mute off in time. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Yeah, because before you adjourn, I wanted to bring up 2 things, and maybe we can put it on the agenda to talk about later. And there's nothing to do with John.
Okay, so this isn't planning and zoning?
No, I just thought we was
okay. If you allow me, can you hold just for 1 second? Let me get out of our planning and zoning, and I'll turn this back over to the chairman. So at this time, I will adjourn planning and zoning, and I will turn the gavel back over to Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, can we get an update on our consent decree projects? Because I know the company that we contract with and outsource and that do a lot of contracting with, a lot of the issues that were supposed to be addressed through the consent decree, when it rains in parts of my district, it's still flooding. And last we spoke with the previous employee who was over that department that talked about it. He said that it was being addressed. He said that it had been addressed, and that was like several times, but still, once we get heavy rains, it's still flooding. So I would like to know what happened. I mean, are we just giving this company Jacobs money and it's not being addressed? I know several times things have been extended out past the deadline as to when this consent decree, all this stuff was supposed to been fixed, and we're still having issues, and we've given this company millions of dollars. So I just like to get an update on what's going on.
So that sounds like that needs to be placed in Public Works, Councilman Mitchell's committee. Councilman Mitchell, and it sounds like to me, and I think more than a consent decree, I believe we're talking about stormwater projects. Our consent decree has more to do with our sanitary sewer overflows.
And that's what's happening.
At Moccasin Bend. Okay. Well, if that's the case, then
I mean,
yes.
it's coming up.
Okay, so you're talking about water coming up out of the manholes and
And
sewage.
we've talked about it and several
Okay.
times, and they assured us that it was fixed, and so all of it need to be addressed. So when it's a heavy rain, the sewer wouldn't be, overflooding, and the storm, all of that. It's an issue still in my district, but it was said previously by a previous employer that all this stuff was taken care of. They had got in there and fixed it, but I noticed it's still happening.
Councilman Mitchell, could you arrange in one of your committee meetings to address this issue? Just I guess kind of an update, progress report on consent decrees, what's been fixed, what's still left. Sounds like.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think what happens many times is we end up with a combined system when it's not supposed to be combined.
Well,
so I think stormwater does mix with sewer, and I think, gosh, I don't know a district where there aren't some places where that happens. So yes, it won't be next week, but let me work on that. Let me get with Public Works and see if we can set something up for a not too distant future committee meeting.
Okay, very good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question, Councilperson Coonrod.
You're welcome. No problem. And then the last thing is that we were presented a few weeks ago by Ms. Karen Reynolds about the disparity study and different things like that. Pretty much they just presented, but it wasn't a follow through or resolution or ordinance put in place to say we need to start doing the work on the things that we discovered in that disparity study. And a lot of times for 3 years or more, we've been talking about purchasing. And a lot of that haven't been addressed. Prior to us getting the results of the disparity study, I presented an equal opportunity for people, and it was sent out by field. And we kind of put it on the back burner because Stacy at the time said, well, we're going to give you all the results from the disparity study and we're going to move forward. Well, COVID happened and a lot of that, I understand that. But we still need to address how we're going to put different things in place to move forward to address the issue. So it's not just Ms. Cameron presented a report and there's nothing or no follow through. We really need to put measures in place to address the disparities that's happening in Chattanooga. And we done kicked this can down the road for many, many years, and we need to try to address it. And I think this is the council that needs to take care of it, and so we can move forward.
Councilwoman, do you have some legislation or a proposal on this equal opportunity that you were suggesting earlier?
Yes, we did. It was last. Yes, I can resend it out.
Okay. Let's.
And I'd love to have everybody's input in it as well.
We'll put that back on the front burner.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything else from any other council person? Okay. If not, we will see everyone back at 6 o'clock. So at this time, we will adjourn our agenda session.
All right. See everybody back.